Good morning. Wow, that's energy. Thanks for attending our session.
That's awesome.
It's Friday,
Yes,
I know,
yes.
but I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Thanks. And we have great agenda for you all. And we will make sure that we'll keep you awake, right? That's the most important thing. Okay, I'll start with the question first. Are your customers struggling with modernizations? Moving from migration to modernizations? Yeah, great. Who are working on a migration at the moment? Great. The folks want modernization? Great. This session is for both of you, right? So don't worry, that's what I mentioned. It's very interesting sessions. It helps you to solve your problems as well. Those are actually focusing on the migration and modernizations. This is a 300-level sessions and intended for business and technical personas. So again, who's from a business folks here? Not quite of that, yeah. Technical? Good.
Okay.
Wow. We have demo for as well, so stay tuned. As slide said, my name is Pragnesh Shah. I'm a senior solution architect focusing on a partner specialized in migration and modernizations. And I'm very excited to join you with my colleague Giovanni.
Hello, everyone. I'm Giovanni Gravesand. I'm also a partner solutions architect, migration and modernization based in New York.
Great. And Alex.
Hi. Ooh, wow. I'm sure I'm not the only person with a sore throat this morning. My name's Alex Kearns. I'm Principal Solutions Architect at UberTask Consulting. UberTask Consulting, an AWS Advanced Tier partner based in the UK. We focus on migration and modernization of Windows workloads. And I'm really excited to be able to share one of our customer stories with you today, as well as how we've been on the journey of modernization pathways.
Thank you very much, Alex. Okay. So what are we covering? Today, we want to take you on a journey of modernization evolutions and want to focus on why modernization is important, modernization pathways, specifically on infrastructure, database, applications, and analytics. We also want to talk about the AWS solution and partner solutions specifically. This is a partner track. We also have a demo to modernize a legacy application with one of our ISV partner tools and AWS services. So let's get started. So migration and modernization is a journey. You agree? Yeah, great. So the first step is start with assessment, discovery. You're selecting the migration strategy and create a business case and get a sense of the readiness. The mobilize phase is more about building the early muscles, get some momentum, define your operating model, and if you have leveraged a cloud center of excellence. Last phase, once your landing zone is ready, you are ready to migrate at scale. And most important thing is you need to do continuous optimizations, right? From performance, cost, very important for. And we see this structure approach, phase approach specifically work with all customers. So the question here is, do you migrate or modernize on the way in, or you modernize after the migrations, right? That's a question normally, like, how do I do modernizations, before or after? And the answer is both, right? Let's find out how. So when the customer has urgency to move from the current on-premises data system, they want to get some cloud flexibility and quickly agility based on that. It starts with the migration as a first step, followed by incremental modernizations. This is a two-step approach to modernizations, and I will call it as a organic evolution to modernizations. And specifically, this approach starts with low-hanging fruit, focus on the replatform first, and then as become mature, you go on a certain way. Certainly, this incremental modernization is a low-risk approach, and sometimes will provide you a better performance as well. But on other side, when the customer wants to get an innovation performance, innovate to faster, specifically on that, get a business agility, the modernization on the way is answered. It is a leapfrog approach to modernizations to achieve the specific goal. Of course, adoption of the higher degree of modernizations is a complex, challenging, but actually improve the order of the long-term success. So 2 step, 1 step. Of course, you agree with this one, right? Modernization is a complex. The customer has to make the fundamental changes into their business capabilities, operating model, and the technology when they're considering the modernizations. And they often bump to the number of challenges. And some of the challenges we see is a decision fatigue, right? So making the quality of decision from the vast ocean of information and getting the prioritize that, it is finding the needles from the haystack, right? So it is too much information, quality of decision is in number one priority. Consensus on a target state architecture is another thing. We have to involve all the organizations between the number of teams that we need to get involved on making that decisions, right? So the challenge here is how do you get their voice in? How do you define and build your architecture which is specifically designed for scalability and drive the business value? That is the most important thing. And the last, and this one is a more critical one as well, that skill gap, right? How do I build my modernization muscles, specifically on the skill side? Another things we saw is how do I actually get the momentums, upskill my resources, and shorten the learning curve. This is most important thing, right? You don't have to spend like month and month to train. You have to shorten the learning curves. You have to come with a very innovative ideas to that. So many times customer ask us like, do you have well-tested and well-defined approach for modernizations? So to address it, we have the streamline the pathway so we can establish the modernizations vocabulary and the best practices. It also helps us to rationalize the applications from the modernization perspective. And finally, it will help to accelerate the modernizations. So how do you do that? So we start defining and decomposing the workload into the 6 modernization pathway. The first will start with move to cloud native. It is about the moving out of legacy applications and decompose into microservices. Move to container. It is more about the gaining efficiency. It's focused on the portability, right? Consistency across the environment. Move to managed database is the next one. Here you are moving from your self-hosted, self-managed commercial database to fully and purpose-built database, specific like Amazon DynamoDB, key value pair, or Amazon Neptune on the graph database, right? Move to open source. This is again moving out from the commercial licensed software to more open source like Linux and container. And we see that many customers get, by adopting this modernization pathway, they are able to reduce the TCO. Move to managed analytics. Again, it's adoption of data lake, data mesh, and specifically on the data lakehouse implementations. Again, here you are moving from the transactional data warehouse to fully managed data warehouse. And finally, move to modern DevOps. Here is more about the adoption of test-driven approach, CI/CD pipeline. And of course, culture mattered the most. That's common things. So as a partner, you might be wondering how is modernization practice is aligned with this pathway. So I want to introduce a modernization pathway assessment. It is a structured framework to understand your organization alignment, business alignment, and the capabilities with respect to the 6 pathway, as I mentioned earlier, right? This is specifically designed for the partner. It provides actions and recommendations specifically based on the quality or capabilities that we identify, any gaps that we identify, to help you to close that gap as well. And this assessment is based on your past delivery and the people capability, right? So if you already have experience with that, now the question here is, as a partner, how do you get started? So please reach out to your partner development team for this enrollment. That is the first step. The second step is about reach out to your partner management solution architect. It's work with you on go for the assessment, and it provides the report. I'm sure you have used migration readiness assessment through ATT tool, or we can say Amazon assessment tool. This assessment is already available there. Now I hand over to Giovanni to more focus on specific pathway along container, move to cloud native, and database. Giovanni, floor is yours.
All right, great, thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks again for joining us this morning. So now what we'll do is we'll explore these pathways in a little bit more detail, discuss the common methodologies and the tools that we've seen in the field being used effectively before we move to a demonstration. All right, so we see as a minimum viable modernization path taking our legacy applications and containerizing them without extensive refactoring, okay? So now a key evolution is that the tools available to us, they vastly improved our ability to do containerization at large scale. And so we've actually been enabling the partner community on a number of low-code, no-code automation platforms for containerization, such as Matilda Cloud and Cloud Hedge. Now, our native tool sets, they're pretty busy as well. So apt2container, we like to think as not just a lift, tinker, and shift tool, but it is also an assessment tool. It's a recommendations tool. Reduces the manual effort of having to determine runtime dependencies in many of our applications. Microservice extractor. Now, this one's interesting. We're using the power of AI within this tool. It gives us recommendations for breaking down monolithic .NET code. It is now natively including .NET porting assistant capability. So now we're able to convert our .NET framework to .NET Core up to 6 times faster using this cloud-enabled version rather than the installer that you might have in a developer IDE. Now, I'm actually going to invite Alex from Ubertest Consulting to discuss, share a story with us, a customer story of move to containers and cost optimization.
It's going to happen every time. I didn't even go to replay last night. This is just Friday. Before I share this customer story, I have one question for you all. So who saw Werner's keynote yesterday? Okay, most of the room. And what was the kind of the main theme through his keynote? Kind of want you to shout it out. Some energy this Friday morning. Yes, great. So this is how we're going to approach this customer story. So it does follow along the move to containers pathway. However, the recurring theme throughout is cost optimization and cost saving. So this particular customer is a financial services customer operating at a global scale, billions of dollars managed in assets. And their workload began in a co-location facility. So it was Java workloads. It was running quantitative financial models on Windows Server 2012, running on VMware virtual machines. So this came with a number of overheads, both cost-wise due to the licensing of Windows Server, but also performance-wise. So they'd identified this need to migrate and modernize from co-location facility into AWS to start trying to save some money on this. Using the Migration Acceleration Program, or MAP as you may know it, we are able to establish Ubertest and AWS as trusted partners for this customer. So that kind of power of 3 together, and then leverage the funding available through the MAP program to reduce the financial burden of modernization. The first step of this was lifting and shifting. In Werner's keynote yesterday, he talked about this idea of if you continue to run your applications in the cloud as you did in your data center, you are never going to be able to realize the full efficiency of them. And it is absolutely true. We'll get a little bit more onto that, but that's something I want to keep in the back of your minds as we go through this. So we know that these modernization pathways aren't necessarily a straight line, they're not necessarily one step, and they're not always one pathway either. So once we'd moved this application as is onto EC2, running the latest compatible version of Windows Server, we started to explore where these cost savings could come from. So we identified that there was a 38% potential cost optimization there, just by replatforming from Windows Server to Linux. So we know that Java workloads, in theory, should be portable across operating systems. I'm sure there's enough experience in this room to know that in reality, perfection is probably not quite as easily attained. So what we identified in this scenario was there were a number of Windows dependencies in the Java application, specifically relating to SQL Server, that meant there was some application refactoring required before we could explore this move to open source pathway. The customer was able to do that, which then unlocked the ability to realize this 38% cost saving straight off the bat. Let's not forget here that we are talking about the move to containers pathway. So bringing it back into containers, not single step, not single pathway. We began to incorporate containers because now that we are running a Linux operating system, it became a little bit easier to containerize. There were less dependencies. We didn't have that overhead of the licensing cost. The ecosystem was a little bit better, much, much easier. So the term that was used earlier was kind of minimal viable modernization. And that's what we were looking to do at this point. It was going from the co-location facility on the very far left and going all the way through to how far can we go, realizing as much as we can each time, that incremental cost optimization, not looking for the kind of the big bang cost optimizations and doing it and stopping after one step, but taking it steady and finding improvements along the way. What we found was that 75% of the usage of this EC2 instances in relation to cost came from idle time. So these financial modeling applications only ran kind of once per day at the start of the market's opening. And as a result, there was a massive opportunity there to be able to cut some costs. So we started to explore things like task scheduling. So on ECS, making sure those tasks are only running at the time they are needed and getting rid of the EC2 instances that were running 24/7 and incurring that cost. Great result for the customer, being able to realize a 38% cost optimization in the first step, and then a 75% later cost optimization by scheduling those tasks. Now, this doesn't even scrape the surface of the opportunities that are present through containerization. So what I'll now do is I'll hand back to Giovanni, and he will explore that further.
Thank you, Alex, for that. So, wonderful story. We can see we can compound our gains when we stack our modernization pathways together in this example. Now, also in this example, we've noticed that our customers, they continue to choose Amazon ECS for its simplicity, but we are seeing many of our customers now moving to Amazon EKS to access a large ecosystem of open source solutions. Our customers have been telling us, please, get us to production faster on EKS, right? They've been asking us for quite some time. And so in 2022, we launched the EKS Blueprints project. And our customers are telling us they're able to onboard workloads in a matter of weeks rather than months. We've got partners as well with offerings built around EKS Blueprints, and you might find them right in the marketplace, actually. So it is Friday, and so I don't want to presume that you've heard about Blueprints this week, but just to quickly recap, it's opinionated infrastructure as code templates intended to help us to quickly bootstrap best practice configurations, such as including controllers for Kubernetes, or bootstrapping observability for EKS using managed services such as Managed Grafana, Managed Prometheus. I'll spend a little bit more time on Blueprints for a moment here. There's a couple of components to understand. So there's Blueprints core, and there's projects that are built on top of the Blueprints core, and we'll hear more about those projects later, which, for example, is data on EKS. But Blueprints core itself leverages the concept of teams, and so we're borrowing this terminology from the GitOps philosophy, so to speak, right? So here we've got platform teams. They've got administrative access to our clusters. They then vend namespaces to application teams. So we think of that as namespaces as a service almost. The second component or element of the Blueprints core is they allow us to bootstrap a wide range of cluster add-ons, in some cases in a single toggle within our infrastructure as code. So that's for both EKS managed add-ons as well as self-managed add-ons from the open source ecosystem, such as for auto scaling, we've got Carpenter for continuous delivery, Argo CD. We're actually going to see Argo CD in the demonstration in a moment. And the final thing to understand with Blueprint's core is the fact that it's really a library of deployment patterns using best practice reference architectures. So you'll find reference architectures for multi-cluster, multi-region, utilizing managed or self-managed node groups, Fargate, even Bottle Rocket, Blue-Green, and Canary configurations, et cetera. And so if you haven't deep dived this week yet, EKS Blueprints, please take a look. And a spoiler, though, this is not going to be the last time you hear Blueprints today. All right, so move to cloud native. This is pathway based on microservices and modern DevOps. And sometimes it is easier to build from scratch. This is the leapfrog approach we heard Pragnesh mention earlier. We find that incremental design patterns, however, starting small, building momentum, this is most effective for modernization, especially in brownfield projects. You've got these large monoliths. They've been built over years, maybe even decades in some cases we've seen. And so the two such patterns we see are leave and layer. We enhance the application around the perimeter. We leave the core intact. There's also the strangled fig pattern that's popularized from the 12-factor applications handbook, so to speak. And what we've done is launched refactor spaces to model an environment for those two incremental patterns. And simply, so our customers are able to use this now to redirect traffic from a common ingress between a monolith account and any number of microservices accounts. So this is the step one, right? We've got our, sort of speak, landing zone for a microservice, let's say, right, with refactor spaces. We now need to think about day two for modernization success. How do we think about observability and governance and third-party integrations? And how do we do this at scale? Every time we want to spin up a new microservice, are we reinventing the wheel? And so what our customers are doing is they are looking to adopt internal developer platforms to solve this challenge, so to speak, right? And so with our customers, we've used AWS Proton to build this self-service platform. And to borrow some GitOps terminology again, your platform teams create these standardized, opinionated infrastructure as code templates. Developers then consume those templates, and they just get to focus on their code. So what we're saying here is solutions such as Proton, which enables a high-velocity developer experience, EKS Blueprints, which pushes us to production much faster, and we've got our landing zone with refactor spaces. This is kind of your fundamental components, a package for a self-services internal developer platform, modernization at scale. Now, we still need tools to observe our applications, especially true for incremental modernization. And so we've been creating stronger partnerships with our APN technology partners in the past year or so, such as from Cast, Dynatrace, many others. We're actually going to see in action vFunction, who's going to be helping us to decompose a monolithic application to microservices and helping us to accelerate domain-driven design. Before we get to the demo, we'll talk about move to managed database. Who thinks moving to managed database is about Amazon RDS? Okay, all right. A little bit more than that. Fundamentally, this pattern is about moving to purpose-built, all right? And so we still follow the methodology from earlier today, the assess, mobilize, migrate, modernize. We start with database discovery and license evaluation, and we've seen a number of tools in the APN marketplace to help our customers, such as Cluttermize, Modelize IT, and many others. From our native tool sets, we've got DMS Fleet Advisor. It helps us to automate inventory, collection, and migration planning for a large database server fleet. And you'll actually be able to see that right within the Database Migration Service Console, DMS. DMS is very popular. It is our most popular database migration tool, as well as schema conversion tool, SCT. But we do find that our customers are now starting to leverage partner solutions for much higher velocity and scale. Solutions from Qlik, Brightflow, Confluent, these are just a couple of examples that we've seen. Using any number of different replication technologies, change data capture, even some interesting Kafka-based technology with syncs and connectors, all to expedite heterogeneous database migration to purpose-built. One last thing with move to managed database, and thematic here is the move to open source. We need more mechanisms to break free, so to speak. We call it database freedom internally at AWS, right? So specifically with the Microsoft SQL to Postgres pattern, we see Babelfish as becoming a key enabler for some of our customers. And so that, if you're not familiar, that's a feature of Amazon Aurora that effectively gives us an interface to translate from T-SQL to PostgreSQL. So Babelfish 3.2 was launched in July of this year, and the feature compatibility increased up to 70% over the GA 1.0 version. So we think if you haven't taken a look since GA at Babelfish, you should take a look now. So I will invite Alex one more time to the stage here to discuss a little bit about Babelfish and how it might play a wider role in their Windows modernization practice. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Giovanni. It worked that time. Great. So we speak to many customers looking to migrate and modernize Microsoft workloads onto and inside AWS. And often the natural choice for migrating a SQL Server workload to AWS is to replatform and look at something like RDS for SQL Server, kind of path of least resistance. But often the desire to move isn't just to start realizing the benefits of a managed service, it's also to save some money. And moving from an on-premise SQL Server to RDS for SQL Server, you still have that commercial license overhead. You're still paying for the pleasure of using SQL Server. And that's where Babelfish comes in. So it's not just moving to managed databases that commercial licensing, of course, comes in. So anything where you're moving from a Microsoft workload into AWS, this kind of idea of moving to open source and exploring options to break free from those licensing overheads is always good. So before Giovanni mentioned it, who'd heard of Babelfish before today? Okay, probably about half. And of those people, who has used it? A lot less people. So yeah, definitely some call to actions there. Give it a go, even with some kind of simple workloads, get a feel for how it works. Babelfish is kind of one tool that we've explored to try and solve this problem, solve the problem of moving from Microsoft SQL Server to an open source engine inside AWS, to combine those cost optimization as well as benefits from modernization. Now, Giovanni talked about the kind of leaps and bounds in terms of compatibility improvements that Babelfish has made since GA. But we're still not quite at 100%. So there is a compatibility assessment tool that Babelfish has. So this tool is called Compass. It's really great in those kind of pre-sales scenarios where you need to fail fast. You need to evaluate the viability of using a tool like Babelfish in later parts of the project. What Compass will do is it will evaluate both SQL and DDL scripts written in T-SQL, so SQL Server's native dialect, and it will categorize its findings into kind of severity in terms of how hard it would be to solve them for those that need to be solved manually. So at Ubertas, we have a real kind of key focus on Microsoft migration and modernization, and see Babelfish as a tool that kind of forms part of that practice. It's something that should enable customers to have additional options on the move to managed database pathway. In some cases, maybe SQL Server is the correct target state for them. In some cases, maybe not. But it's always great to have more options. the goal with this is always to lessen the risk and the cost when you're comparing to other kind of heterogeneous migrations where you might need to explore application refactoring as well as database refactoring. So I'll hand back now to introduce the live demo.
Oops, am I on? Great. Okay, so it's Friday, and we thought, let's not wait until the end of this session to do our demonstration. So Pragnesh and Alex will man the booth here and walk us through. So we're going to focus on cloud native here for a bit. And if you remember, again, it's about microservices. And so we really have to get into the code here by decomposing the legacy app. One common approach is to use domain-driven design, of course, and that typically might happen in event storming workshops. And that's where we get an opportunity to isolate and free business logic from a large code base. And so vfunction is going to help us here to automate this domain-driven design. And so for our demo approach, vfunction is going to dynamically observe our order management system, OMS. It'll give us an initial recommendation for domain-driven design, and then we will extract this service from a Java monolith. Now, to maximize our time here, we have decoupled our build and deploy step, which is actually consistent with GitOps philosophy. And so much of the build has already occurred. We've taken that extracted code. We've done some minor refactoring to Java Spring Boot. We've containerized, and that image is available to us in our repository. So what you'll see here is really the deployment step using Argo CD, open source tooling, graduated in the CNCF registry. Argo has already been bootstrapped into our EKS cluster from our Blueprints core modules. And then finally, Refactor Spaces is providing that Strangler Fig environment for us. It'll transparently allow us to reroute this new service traffic from this common ingress that's coming in from API Gateway, all behind the scenes. Gentlemen?
Let's get into action. Can you hear me? Yeah, let's get into action. Okay. So this is the vfunction. It's pointing to currently into OMS, is order management systems, right? And there's multiple steps, we'll go through that. So first is vfunction's two core capabilities, architecture observability and the refactor engine. So architecture observability is focusing on identifying the key domain from the existing applications, and refactor engine specifically help to extract the microservices, right? So two core capabilities, excellent. First step is always start with the learning. This is AI-based learning. So when vfunctions point to the applications, it will learn that what is happening behind the team. And once learning is completed, vfunctions presented a great analysis about finding what is existing domain-driven design. In this case specifically, this domain-driven design is focused on the order management system, right? And let's explore what is this inside. The first is about understanding is what is this circle. So this circle is focused on the functional domain, right? So each circle will represent the functional domain within the applications. And in this case, we have the inventory, order, and product domains. And the color of this domain is specifically designed how this domain is exclusively within that, right? And within each domains, you have the software component, right? So if you imagine that each applications, how it designed is, you have the software components in the classes, you have the databases, as well as other API calls specifically. And each resources has a domain-specific things, database transactions, API call, and the messaging. You can see from that vfunction, it clearly provide all information around that. Right? And as I mentioned earlier, you also want to identify what is my entry points, how my internal applications business flow is going around within the applications. And this is, you can see whole detailed trees that's provided within the applications. Now, another important aspect of tool is dependency, like Now, between the domain, there is a line, it represents the dependencies between the domain, right? So that is another important aspect of that when you do the discovery of the domain-driven design, what is the application's dependency within that. Another important aspect is about identify the domain exclusivity, how exclusive my domain is. It's like, what is the quality of my domain? And that domain exclusivity is specifically defined by the colors. So red color represents the lower exclusivity. My domain is very poor. The green color represents my domain is very highly exclusive. It's in a good conditions of, I will say. Now, from that, you can see that what is the exclusivity specifically for each domain. Right. Now, next phase is once you understand what is inside the applications, V functions, another important aspect of that is identify the recommendation, provide the recommendations, right? It's about reducing the technical depth. So in my architecture, in this specific applications, how do I actually reduce my technical depth? And there's a two aspect of that, identify any high depth class. So what is my class is highly dependence on that. Second important aspect of that is about the dead code. In your legacy application, there may be code that's never executed or maybe decommissions, right? Which is important from the identify. So this to the high depth class functionality will identify and provided this from this example, you can see the specific class is highly dependent. The recommendation here is to how do you decompose that applications. Dead code, again, as mentioned, identify the dead code as well. So from this application, the V function presented a dead code. If you are not happy, you can remove that dead code. The next thing is about I want to understand my resource requirement within that. And another aspect of that when you're doing the microservices or decomposition that whatever the database, right, is very important. Are you also extracting the database? Are you also moving the database with that or keep your database with you? So V function clearly identify that how exclusively, how my database dependency within my applications. And this is one of the example of that. It will also show you on a specific area that this is my domains, what are my database, what are my resources dependence on that one, right? So there's another great feature of that. So it will give you end-to-end insight with your applications, your dependencies, your domain dependency, functional dependency, and the database dependency. Now, another important aspect is that once you discover how my applications is highly dependent, you want to extract some of the microservices. Now here is specifically I want to, in this example demo, we have the order management system, and I want to extract the order management out of my domain design, right? So how do I do that? Before that, I also want to improve my architecture capabilities as well. Like I want to reduce my depth. So what I'll do it? So V functions provide a capability out of the box. So here, if you see that I want to reduce the dependency or reduce exclusivity or improve the exclusivity around that. So what I can do is with the V functions on the screen, I can merge two domain. That's why I can improve the exclusivity of that. Right? So here you can see my domain is now highly exclusive. So all red turn into the green. Simple things. So we have completed for order management the domain-driven design. So now I'm ready to extract. So again, another feature of the domain V function is provide you the capability to extract the specific domain. And this area is done by extract domain service. What I'll do is here is identify the domains I want to extract, click that and save it. Now, when I extract the confirmations or domains, I need to identify what is my target, where I want to run. This application at the moment is running on the Java. But my target application I want to run, that microservices is on the Spring Boot in this case. The second thing is what I need when I extract the microservices, I also need a dependencies, common class library as well, right? And other thing is API endpoint to communicate with my microservices. And so seamlessly, V function does this seamlessly, right? You can extract the domain out of that. You can see that. Another things, when you want to extract, V function also provide a code copy utility out of the box thing. So with the code copy utility, you can point to that and seamlessly extract your domain out of that. Now let's move to my development environment. So this is my development environment looks like. So what we have done, like with the V functions, we identify the domains, extract the identified domain, extract it for which domains I want to interested in. Now I'm in my workstation environment. You can see here all my files, original source code is here. I also downloaded my code copy utility. Now, if I list what is my current code looks like, this is my original source code. With vfunction utility, I can extract the service specification file, and my domain is ready to use now. And also extract REST API, as I mentioned earlier, and that now what we have done is this one, out of these things, I have my domain device available. So what we have done so far is just a visual representation is about this domain-driven design from our OMS. We have extracted order management services. So what is the next step? Once I have my source code, I can onboard this source code to my DevOps practices. So we can push the code to my source code repository, build it, create image is in my available. And now I invite Alex to walk us through focus on the CD part. So we understand based on the code, I trigger my CI, continuous integration. Now let's look into actions about the CD. Thank you, Alex.
That's great. Thank you, Prignesh. Let's just get this demo up, and we will be on our way. Okay. So what we want to do first is we've talked about EKS blueprints, we've talked about some tools like Argo CD. I want to kind of see them in action. So what we have in Cloud9 here is we have our workloads repository. So it's a repository which has the Kubernetes manifest files in. So a really, really easy way for us to deploy workloads into our Kubernetes cluster that's been created by Amazon EKS blueprints. So what we can see in here is we've got set up the 3 manifest files we need inside our team that's separate to the platform team. So keep everything nice and isolated. And these manifest files are also allowing us to specify resource requirements, where the Docker image is, etc. So what we can do is we want to have a look at Argo CD in its current state. So we can see here we've got our 3 manifest files deployed into resources as EKS, in our EKS cluster. So we can see our service, our deployment, and our ingress. So at this point, this is just the extracted order controller that we saw in the vfunction demo. So what we're going to do is, so we can come back to this and see that Argo CD is live and functional and working, I'm going to, in Cloud9, just add another example application in here. So this is a different app. So we're just going to take this, pop it in here, and then we will commit and push that. So we should have our 3 new files we've created here for our example application. Okay, so we'll come back to that one in a little bit later. So what we're going to do now is we've talked about refactor spaces and how refactor spaces can help you to implement the strangler fig pattern when you're modernizing an application. So if we head over to refactor spaces now, what we will be able to see is we've got an environment set up for our demo today. I'm assuming this is large enough for everybody as well. We've got an application set up, and we currently have 2 routes active. So we have one route which is going to our legacy application, which is the monolith, and one route which is going to our decomposed order controller. So what we're going to do is we're going to deactivate the order controller to start with. So once this is deactivated, what's happening in the background is it's doing things like updating API gateway, closing that route off, so all the traffic will then be directed to the legacy monolith. What we then want to do is have a bit of a look at some of the requests that we can send and see how we can direct traffic to different areas with refactor spaces. So we can send this first request in here. So this is getting an order. The URL it's going through is the URL of the API gateway that sits inside refactor spaces. And what I want to look at here is, for demonstration purposes, on the decomposed order service, we've added a custom header so we can show you when it's changed over. So this at the moment is hitting the monolith. We haven't got this extra header in here. The request is returning. We can make another request. Again, still going to monolith. This is the inventory controller, but post cutover, that will still remain with the monolith. So what we can then do is we can then go back into refactor spaces. We can activate our route. So now what this is doing the inverse of what we've just done. So it's taking all the traffic that was going to the monolith destined for /order, and it will now be sending it, rather than going to our monolith service, it's sending it to our order controller service, which is deployed in EKS blueprints. So if we now head back over to Postman and we create an order, this time the request we're sending is going to /order. It's a post request. So we should find what comes back is this here. So we've got this extra header in here that we've created already. So this time it's coming from our order controller. Hopefully it's just about large enough to see. But that's kind of the idea of being able to incrementally modernize, send some traffic over to one service while still retaining this legacy monolith and implementing that strangler fig pattern. And just to prove that everything isn't going to the microservice, we can do another request to /inventory and see that that header isn't there because it's coming from the monolith. So just to finish up this live demo, we can go back now to Argo CD, and if we refresh this, what we will see is we've now got our new service, deployment, and ingress created from the commit and the push I did for that example application. So I can take this one here, and we've got our example app that's been deployed through Argo CD. And that concludes our live demo.
Thank you, Alex. That works finally. That's good. So what we just saw is how AWS service and ISV partner tool can help to accelerate the modernization, right? That's very important. That's a synergy that we just saw. Now just turn back to another important aspect of the data. So data is a strategic asset, right? And it's a cornerstone of every organization for digital transformations. Companies are collecting, creating, storing the data more than ever before. But much of them remains unutilized or sometimes never utilized at all. Accenture found that there may be 68% organizations they are unable to realize the value of the data. Customer has made already capital investment in big data ecosystem, analytics ecosystems. But these systems or solutions are complex, time-consuming, very expensive, and hard to scale when you need it. So moving to the fully managed and purpose-built AWS services, customer can unlock the true potential of data. They can also build their advanced capabilities. In some of the examples from the field, we see that customer can move Hadoop and Spark to Amazon EMR, They can migrate the ETL workload to AWS Glue, moving the transactional database or data warehouse to Amazon Redshifts for exabyte of data scale analysis and doing the complex query analysis for that. On a streaming side, customer can leverage Kafka and Kinesis. And finally, customer has Elk Stack. They can move it to open source for live analysis, search, and the log analytics. At AWS, we see the customer get most out of data when they build high-performance data platform. And this data platform has the capability to ingest data from various sources, transform it, and store in a consumable format. It should also provide the actionable insight. At the same time, make the data available or accessible to the right application, to the right user when they need it, which is extremely important. But the challenges with this data and modern data platform is specifically how do I jumpstart how do I build my, I don't want to spend month and month in designing and building the solutions, right? Second thing, we see the customer wants to leverage a Kubernetes, like for the consistency across the environment. Another important aspect of customer also want to integrate with the third-party tool. They also want to leverage a open source tool. What we have seen, the Kubernetes has emerged as a popular tool specifically for data workload. And for that, we have designed an open source project called Data on EKS on Amazon EKS. It's an open source project. I will dive into the next slide. I also recommended to check this QR code, which is specifically for AWS Industry Blueprint for Data and AI. We also have Amazon SCT extractor, mainly for migrating or moving the data on Hadoop cluster to Amazon EMR, and also from data warehouse to Redshift. I also want to call out some of the partner tools, Unravel, Impetus, and the Pepper Data, especially for the customer who are interested to move their legacy big data and analytics migration, want to migrate or transform. So we have the partner tool as well for you. Now let's look at the data on EKS specifically. So data on EKS is an open source project. Customer and partner, specifically your partner, can design and build a scalable data platform on EKS. It primarily consists of infrastructure as a code template, a reusable and reference architecture. Also, we have designed specifically for data-centric workload. So you can take the patterns and reference architecture and deploy it for that. And of course, you will get AWS best practices and industry expertise part of the data on EKS. This is a QR code. You can check the zip in as well as the website. One more thing, this data on EKS is built on data on EKS project, especially what Giovanni has mentioned earlier. So data on EKS has 5 patterns. And you can build data processing, analytics, AI, ML workload. You can also run distributed database, write and build a complex workflow for your specifically for data pipeline, and also build a streaming platform. We saw the Amazon EMR on Amazon EKS provides up to 61% lower cost and 65% of performance improvement specifically for the Spark workload. Please check this QR code for the more details. You can leverage pattern and configurable templates to provision the infrastructure faster in hours and minutes. You can also pick up the right size compute and the storage to scale rapidly, achieve that, even the 1,000 scale nodes, you can scale it to that. So that's the important aspect of the benefit on data on EKS. Now let's look at finally, how do you build end-to-end data model platform? So at the core, you use Amazon EKS Blueprint. What we see is a customer typically start with their stateless applications and then move to the stateful applications like AI, ML data when they become the mature. Customer also want to leverage hybrid machine learning platform or hybrid learning machine learning architecture so they can learn cube workflow for experimentation, use Amazon EKS for high-scale capability using specifically for the GPU instances. And then later on, they can integrate with Amazon SageMaker. You can also run, deploy, and tune large language model on that platform. And finally, we see Amazon EMR is another popular use case to run on Amazon EKS. So you can run big data platform, Spark workload side by side. Now I hand over to focusing on the next slide is about how as a partner, what is a partner opportunity, how you can build accelerators for that. So as a partner, you can build a professional and managed service and manage on that. We can also differentiate your services. Some of our ISV partner has already built a observability, scalability, and the security specific offering around the Amazon EKS accelerators. As a partner, you can integrate EKS data as well as EKS platform part of your delivery capabilities or part of a delivery project as well. So you can improve the developer productivity for that. And finally, because it is infrastructure as a core template, you can actually provision the infrastructure faster, build a POC environment faster, so you can you can earn the customer's trust. Now I hand over to Giovanni to talk more about how partner can earn customer trust on their modernization journey.
Thank you, Praganesh, and thank you everyone again for sticking with us. So just get us through here real quickly. So we're a technical crowd here, of course, but modernization we also have to address some of the business elements with some of our customers. And so you as a partner, you're going to want to know how we can unblock stalled modernization programs and earn trust with our customers. And has anyone ever participated in an experience-based acceleration EBA with AWS? Anyone? Wow, okay, all right. So not many of you. All right, so this is a good introduction quickly. This is a mechanism that we use for unblocking stalls with customers. And so there are a number of different EBA variants, and this is specifically the modernization EBA. We call this a MODAX. We have a number of customer examples of success with this. It's a very straightforward methodology. The secret sauce really is, part of it is in the assessment and architecture, and this is where we apply a lot of these pathways together, right? So we start with an assessment. We use a tool called MODA, and that is a tool that is available to you as a partner now in the A2T portal. So please contact your alliance leads for access to that. That assessment is both technical and business dimensions involved. It leads us to this EBA, this modernization party, which is sort of what most folks sort of associate with the EBA. Ultimately, it helps our customers to kind of bring their core teams together very quickly, and we find that that is the key mechanism to get us to move forward in a lot of block projects. And so as a partner, many of our partners have actually supported some of these MODAX engagements, and you can actually become a MODAX delivery partner as well. So the first thing is, if you'd like to learn more about this methodology, you could use the QR code on the left to find out more. We'll be running some boot camps first half of next year. And so QR code on the right, yeah, you're right. You can register your interest with that mailing list. I'll give you a moment there. All right, so I'm just going to send you folks away with just a couple of takeaways. Our goal for today was to simply demonstrate a way you can use these different tools that you may already be familiar with into an end-to-end process, okay? So the first takeaway is each of these pathways they're technical in nature, but there's a value benefit at the end of each one of them. And we saw that with Alex's example, where each incremental pathway that was taken, there was a quantifiable business benefit. And so think about these pathways, both technical and value, as a value framework, so to speak. And so help customers answer these questions. Where do I start? What do I use using the pathways? So they want a modernization roadmap, and we use the pathways to provide them that. And lastly, your last takeaway is we've introduced a lot of tools to you today. Maybe you've already developed a lot of these tools in-house on your own. We think you can bootstrap a modernization practice by adopting some of the elements that we've talked about today. Some of our APN partners, such as vFunction, you can reach out to them at the end of this session if you'd like. Refactor Spaces, Babelfish, EKS Blueprints, Data on EKS, please check them out and see how they can be leveraged in your practice. And with that, we'd really love for you to complete the survey. We are a data-driven company. We'd love to know what you thought of us today. And one last thing also is the partner pathway assessment that Pragnesh mentioned earlier. You can reach out to your partner development reps to enroll and request this assessment as well. All right, so these resources will be available to you in the PDF that will be attached to the artifacts at the end of probably about 2 weeks, I think, just about. And with that, myself, Pragnesh, and Alex, thank you very much and wish you safe journeys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.